Dan Dickau here for the Bulldog broadcast on the Field of 68 Media Network. Well, we're fully into the college basketball season now. Gonzaga sitting at 2-0. This week's updated polls have not been released yet, but I would imagine Gonzaga creeps up a couple spots. Won't be probably higher than I would guess 18 at the highest. But at this point in the season, it really doesn't matter, especially with all of the opportunities that are in front of them here in the next couple weeks. If they continue to improve and they handle their business that's in front of them, they should be, a top 10 team in no time, especially now with the addition of Grant Foster. And I think that he's kind of doing a tremendous job of kind of starting to get into the flow. Still not in full game shape from my eyes, but that shouldn't take him a whole lot of time. But you look around the landscape of college basketball, there's some really good teams out there. Duke's looking really good right now. Alabama really impressed me, which they go on the road to play St. John's in Madison Square Garden, and they win 103-98, I believe it was, in a really fun game to watch. Gonzaga will be playing them in a couple weeks. Then you look at what Duke looks like with Cameron Boozer. Arizona looks really good. BYU looks really good. And this isn't even mentioning Houston and UConn and Kansas, North Carolina, what they're doing as well. So great start to the college basketball season. And I know I've been against the transfer portal at times with the free flowing of movement. I still think if you transfer, which you should be able to, you got to sit out 1 year. Or you go one free transfer. If you want to transfer again, then you have to sit out a year just to limit that a little bit. Don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to see that. And then the NIL, my initial thought was it was going to take a couple of years. We're still figuring out what this is going to look like based on the revenue sharing, based on all of these new different rules and regulations and guidelines and everything that's being presented. We're starting to learn and see what that's going to look like. But what it's doing essentially, though, is it's allowing the fringe pro players that might have left after their freshman or sophomore year to stick around for college. If there's not a clear-cut opportunity to be a first-round draft pick. And what it's also doing, or what it's done last year and this year, is it's allowing those guys that had that fifth-year waiver to play, Grant Foster included, Adam Miller included. You could probably even put Steele Venters in that conversation instead of leaving college and going chasing that European professional career and trying to carve their way back to the NBA. If that's within the realm for their careers, you get a chance to play in college. And so I think the talent level at the college level is as high as I can remember in recent years. And you throw that on top with some unbelievable freshmen, Cameron Boozer, who I mentioned, AJ Debonsa, Darren Peterson at Kansas, Caleb Wilson at North Carolina. And then the one that caught my eye this weekend was the freshman. The name is escaping me, but from Virginia Tech. I believe he had 33 with 5 made threes and some unbelievable shots in a win there. Read a little bit more in depth on him. And McGilvery Environmental can handle any of your construction needs, specializing in new construction, repairs, residential and commercial asphalt paving, excavation, environmental mediation, and hazardous waste. Reach out to Kip McGilvery at McGilvery Environmental today at 208-556-6384 for your free estimate. Been a little bit inconsistent at times over the course of the growth and trajectory of his career, but man, he looked really good. 6'7", 6'8", good handle, can play the point at times, but really good player. But that's not what you're here for. You're here to listen to Gonzaga updates. First off, we want to thank our big-time sponsors, Cooney's Tie, Denena and Associates, McGilvery Environmental, and ICCU. Thank you for their support, and support them when you get a chance. But again, like I said, for Gonzaga, great first week. Had that Texas Southern win, which we touched on last week, but they get a test in Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena. I was able to watch most of the game after figuring out the YouTube TV, ESPN issues, got a secondary account that I've completely forgot about. So was able to watch that game. And what I saw in that first half was tremendous, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I thought they were on point with their rotations. I thought they were aggressive. They really took Oklahoma out of what they wanted to do on that end of the floor. And then offensively, you got back to seeing what Gonzaga always does. Push the pace in transition, establish the interior with rim runs, deep, low, duck in, post ups, and then great spacing with quickness into your actions, whether it's your continuity ball screen actions, whether it's shallow cuts into cross screens and post ups for EK, whether it's high lows. I thought they did a really nice job of getting into those actions quickly and with good spacing. And if you remember last week, that was the one thing that I touched on for that first 7-8 minutes in the home opener against Texas Southern. Wasn't great at times, but it was much better against Oklahoma. I think as far as individual performances, 4 Gonzaga players in double figures, Graham Ike with 19 and 11, Braden Huff 13 and 9. Even though he was 6 of 17 from the field, I don't think you're going to see that too often where he shoots, around 35% or so, because he and EK both hovered last year around that 60% mark. Tyon Grant Foster, a big spark off the bench with 14. I thought he was really good in particular in that first half, getting out in transition, being active on the glass. There was one play in particular. I think he had a cut, missed the layup, got the offensive rebound, missed the offensive rebound, the offensive putback, and then stuck with it and was able to either score or get fouled. I believe, if I remember right, he got fouled. But that's the type of mentality that he can bring. His relentlessness on the offensive glass, his relentlessness in attacking the rim, and his relentlessness in getting out in transition, I think is going to really do wonders for this team. It's going to open up post play. I think it's going to open up things on the perimeter for Adam Miller and Steele Venters. And so that was great to see. And then Jalen Worley, another great performance, 13 points, 8 rebounds, 5 of those on the offensive end of the floor. I think one of the interesting things, though, is Graham Ike fouls out. He had some foul issues at times last year. I'm not overly concerned just simply because of the depth that Gonzaga has. Diani only played 1 minute, and I think that's really what you're going to see throughout most of the year. Yeah, we've talked about, whether you've listened to this or you've listened to Greg Heister and myself on some of the early games in the exhibition season. They do have a legit 11 deep roster that guys can play, but Diani with 1 minute, Davis Fogel, after playing well with, I think it was 11 points in 10 minutes in the opener, didn't get in. But it's hard to play that many games. And so you saw a 9-man rotation. And I think for the most part, that's what you're going to see. But I do want to see finding ways to get Fogel some minutes early in the season against some of this high-level competition, just because I think at some point in the year, you're going to need him, and I think he's going to come through in a big moment when it's needed from him. Team statistic wise, at least, mentioned a great first half. Second half wasn't great. I don't think the big thank you to one of our sponsors, Cooney's Tie. My family and I live on the north side of Spokane, and we absolutely going to Cooney's Tie, whether it is in person, whether it's takeout. The food is always phenomenal, as authentic of Thai food as I have ever had throughout my travels across this country. Unbelievable service, unbelievable price, unbelievable people that are involved with Cooney's Thai. Whether it's the pad Thai, whether it's the pad CU, whether it's one of their awesome curries, you will be thankful that they took great care of you. Again, Cooney's Thai on the north side. Check them out online today, cooniesthai.com. Whether you want to sit in the restaurant and have tremendous service or order for takeout, it will be piping hot and ready for you when you show up. Thanks again to Cooney's Thai. Attention to detail on the defensive end of the floor was as good, but you got to give Oklahoma a lot of credit. They made some adjustments. They took Gonzaga out of transition much better in the second half. And Oklahoma actually outscored Gonzaga 38-34 in the second half. But Gonzaga was +7 on the glass, which is, what you want to see when you're going up against, those bigger power conference teams like Oklahoma out of the SEC is, compete on the glass, win, and they won that battle on the glass. Only 7 turnovers, which was great to see. 5 of 11 from the free throw line, which is something that got to get cleaned up a little bit. One of the exhibition games was right around 55% as well, but that was a sample size of some guys that weren't going to shoot a lot of free throws in my eyes during the regular season. But, Tylen Grant Foster comes to mind. He was 1 of 3 from the free throw line. And so I think that's something, it's not something to be concerned about just yet, but just to keep an eye on. And then 6 of 22 from 3. Steele Venters 1 of 3 from beyond the arc. Adam Miller hit 2 threes. But I think for Gonzaga, Grant Foster can make threes, but he's not a great 3-point shooter. I think Braden Smith can make 3-point shots, but he's not a knockdown 3-point shooter. St. Superi still falls into that same category for me, but you got to get Miller and Venters really comfortable hunting threes. And if they can be a consistent and reliable deep ball threat, which I think they will be, that's going to really enhance the offensive attack. Interesting though, Graham Ike mentioned fouled out, got a technical foul. Seeing it on TV with a couple of the replays, didn't look like he did much other than maybe a hand gesture, but something to keep an eye on. He picked up a couple technicals last year. I had seen something in the early articles that he was not going to get any technicals this year, and lo and behold, takes 2 games, gets one. But it was a non-impactful technical foul. It was something that I thought shouldn't have been a technical foul. The 2 guys I kind of was impressed with was Jalen Warley. He again shows how he can impact the game without ever having a play called for him. He's a great cutter. We mentioned 5 offensive rebounds, so he's just so active on the glass. You can play small ball with him, put him at the 4, and he's good in pick and pop, and then gets it in the roll, and he makes great quick decisions, or he can finish at the rim if he attacks. But then defensively, his versatility is really starting to show. One of the reasons why they wanted him in that transfer portal, and there were some questions just because he's not a great shooter, doesn't score it a lot, but every good team, if they want to be great, needs those kind of connector players, and I think Worley can become that this year for Gonzaga. And then the other one was Adam Miller. I liked what I saw. I don't think he forced the issue. I think he's so experienced, and he's got a lot of basketball IQ and knowledge that he's going to understand and see when and where he can pick his spot. So those guys jumped out to me. Moving ahead to Creighton, Creighton, they had a great exhibition season where they went and tested themselves against Iowa State and won. In Iowa State, top 15 right now. Colorado State, they also beat them. Colorado State's a program in transition, but Ali Farouk-Manish, first-year head coach, I think is going to do great things there eventually. Maybe not in year 1, but that is a good basketball program. So for them to beat those 2 teams in the exhibition season gets them ready for South Dakota, where when you look at it, 92-76 win against a Summit League team, you wouldn't be overly impressed, but Creighton's one of those teams that has a lot of new pieces, a lot of new faces, guys that are trying to figure their way out under Greg McDermott and how fast he wants to play, because they'll play as fast as anybody in the country. So this game against Creighton coming up is going to be exciting to watch, just because it's going to be up and down. I would not be surprised to see the game in the 90s. I think both teams want to play that way. I think, Creighton has a disadvantage as far as pace in this game, simply for the fact that, they don't have a returning guard in Stephen Ashworth that understands truly what Greg McDermott wants to do. You look at their point guard, Nick Graves, going to take him a little bit of time, although he's got a ton of potential. He averaged nearly 18 a game at Charlotte. And so he's kind of sliding into that point point guard role, having those responsibilities. Bulldog fans, we know basketball is all about teamwork, hustle, and having someone you can trust in the clutch. Life isn't much different. When challenges come your way, especially family matters, you need a strong team by your side. That's where Danetta and Associates step in. They're more than just a family law firm. They're your advocates, guiding you through the hard files life throws your way with skill and care. In Spokane and beyond, Danetta and Associates are ready to fight for what matters most, your family. Call 509-325-0125 or visit padlawoffice.com to learn more. That's padlawoffice.com to learn more. And then you look at the other transfers that Creighton has. They got a pair of Iowa transfers. Owen Freeman, 6'10", led Iowa in scoring 2 years ago before being injured a lot of last year. He had 19 points in 19 minutes, 9 of 11 from the field in their opening win. And then the other Iowa transfer, Josh Dix, is a 6'6", versatile wing who can do a lot of different things. They've also got another wing on the perimeter with great size, 6'8", Blake Harper, who was the MEAC Player of the Year out of Howard a season ago. So this is going to be a fun matchup, Gonzaga versus Creighton, simply for the fact that both teams want to play fast. Creighton has good wings with good size, too. I mentioned Dix, excuse me, and Harper going against Worley and Foster, Adam Miller, Steel Venters. So high-level game on the docket for Gonzaga. It'll be the first time in quite some time that Gonzaga has hosted Creighton. If I remember right, about 7-8 years ago, Creighton played in the played in McCarthy. So this game is back. This game has happened a number of times in recent years, and I think this is another good resume builder for Gonzaga. You look at the Big East. They didn't get as many teams in the tournament last year as they did 2 years ago when UConn won their second of back-to-back titles. But the Big East is good this year. I mean, you look at UConn's going to be good again. St. John's preseason top 5. Creighton, I think, has a chance to challenge for the Big East title. Syracuse looks resurgent. And then Louisville, Louisville's in the ACC now. A lot of those teams look like they've reloaded in a good way. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the Big East teams, similar to Gonzaga, don't have football. And so a lot of this revenue generating money that would typically have a percentage that has to go to football, these Big East schools are able to allot that money to men's basketball. And so they were very active in the transfer portal. They've got a chance to have some really good teams. Oh, the other team was Georgetown. Had a surprising road win at Maryland in the Big Ten this past week. So Big East looks good. So I think this is going to be a great resume builder for Gonzaga if they can get this home win at McCarthy. When you look at the first two home games, essentially two home games, even though the Oklahoma game was at Spokane Arena, and you look at the totality of what occurred, Gonzaga got what they needed done. They went 2-0. Lots of guys got minutes in that Texas Southern game. Second game, you start to see a little bit of a shrinkage of the rotation, which is normal. But you saw a team that very similar to that Baylor game last year in the home opener at the Spokane Arena where they absolutely blitzed Baylor. They had that same energy, that fire, that execution early in that first half against Oklahoma. The second half, you saw a little bit of slippage, and that's normal. But still, to come away with a win against the SEC team, it is going to be a resume builder because Oklahoma is going to get some quad one wins throughout the season. And so Gonzaga in this non-conference just has to keep plugging in wins in that column that are going to be resume builders when you get into March and the selection committee starts looking at it. Because once you get to the WCC, you clearly have the opportunities against St. Mary's. You think San Francisco is going to be an opportunity, although they let one slide at Memphis where they had chances this past week. But the couple things that jump out at me right now is the point guard situation. I don't really want to call it a situation yet. I am still really high on Braden Smith, but you move up in level of athleticism and size and length versus in those exhibition wins. And he's not quite able to get into the paint the way that you hope. A little bit.
Hi, Mom.
The world's leading immersive basketball training experience that combines in-person skill development with digital gamification and virtual competition. At Shoot 360, you will train with our coaches, measure your skills with our proprietary technology, and track your progress on the Shoot 360 mobile app. Shoot 360 Spokane. Unlock your game.
Not as fluid getting into the offense as you would think, or you would hope. It only had 13 minutes in that game against Oklahoma. St. Superi played the majority of the minutes at the point guard at 26. I liked what I saw in regards to the poise from St. Superi of starting to grow week to week to week. And so that makes you curious and makes you wonder, where is this point guard role going to evolve to? Is it going to be about 20 minutes a piece as we get in through the season, into the heart of the season? Is it St. Superi eventually going to take the majority of those minutes and maybe flip it to where he's starting? He's playing about 25, Smith about 15. It's hard to say, but I do think Smith brings a lot to the table. And if it were to flip where St. Superi becomes the starter, Braden Smith could be an unbelievable off the bench energy game changer in regards to his speed, where a lot of times most teams, you play faster with your starting point guard, and then a backup comes in and you're a little bit more slow down the pace, where that could actually flip if that were eventually to be the case. Now, I'm not saying it's going there yet, but just something to keep an eye on early in this season. You got a lot of good tests coming up. Like I mentioned, you got the Creighton, you got the Alabama, you got the Maryland coming up, both right around Thanksgiving time. So something to keep an eye on. The other thing is the 3-point shooting. I think Venters and Adam Miller, as mentioned earlier, have to be guys that are hunting shots and have to become deep three, reliable, consistent shooters. And I don't have any concerns about those two. I think that they will. But finding the other guys to be able to present just enough of a threat to create more space on the interior for Huff and Ike, I think is going to be huge. Innocenti hit 1-3 in transition. I think Tyon Grant Foster has shown the ability over the course of his career. I think his best year was 37% from three his junior year at Grand Canyon. Worley's not going to be a 3-point shooter. But then I think St. Superi could become a solid 3-point shooter. Again, he's getting used to the speed and everything asked of him role and responsibility wise. But at least one of those three will need to step up and be another reliable 3-point shooting threat. Innocenti, really didn't touch on him. Only 3 minutes in the start, played about 25 minutes, had that defense that you're expecting, but really kind of showed similar to what he was last year on the offensive end of the floor. Not much of a threat, but if he can find a way to carve out a couple extra 3-point attempts and make himself a threat, I think that's really going to go a long way. So big week for Gonzaga, as mentioned, start 2-0. You got a huge opportunity in my eyes against a really good Creighton basketball team. They're hovering right around 25 in the polls. As mentioned, the polls haven't come out this week. I wouldn't be surprised if they're at 22, 23. But you've got this week coming up, and then you start looking at Arizona at the end of the week on Friday the 14th, a team out of the Big 12 where Bobby Hurley seems every year to kind of have to put together a new roster. And I think he's pretty darn good at it, of adjusting what he does offensively on the fly based on his roster makeup. They're always going to compete defensively. They're going to typically be mostly man, but they will throw a couple different looks at you. That mentioned they're a team in transition with their roster rebuild, which is the case across the board in college basketball. But they lost some huge pieces. BJ Freeman, who's no longer there. And unfortunately, if you've been following college basketball news, his name's popped up in some of these prop bet scandals. But that's beside the point. You got to find a way at Arizona to replace Adam Miller, who's oddly enough on Gonzaga's roster this year. So that'll be a homecoming game of sorts for Adam Miller. But really, Jaden Quantance is the big one, the big loss for Arizona State, where he's now at Kentucky. If you remember last year's game, Gonzaga hosted Arizona State, and there wasn't a lot of, I don't want to say excitement about Arizona State, simply because they always kind of hovered in the middle in the Pac-12. They moved to the Big 12, and the expectations weren't that high. But then they come into Spokane and gave Gonzaga all they could handle early in that non-conference last year. It took a couple late big buckets for Gonzaga to pull away. I think it was a 4 or 6 point win at the end of the day. But Quantance's length gave them some issues at times. Their aggressiveness on the defensive end of the floor gave Gonzaga difficulties at times. And so I think for Gonzaga to go on the road for a road game, a true road game, not a neutral site game. It's on campus at Arizona State in the fourth game of the year, I think is another great resume builder, because you're looking at Arizona State in the Big 12, their net, their Ken Palm, everything's going to be solid at the end of the year, even if they're middle of the pack of the Big 12, which when you look at the preseason poll rankings, they're towards the bottom of the Big 12. But Bobby Hurley always seems to find ways to have his teams ready for big games. And I would expect that to be the case again on this Friday when Gonzaga heads down to the Phoenix area to play the Sun Devils. So good first week for Gonzaga. Looking forward to this second week of the regular season, and then it gets busy in a hurry and it gets difficult in a hurry. So appreciate you joining. Thanks for listening to the Bulldog broadcast on the Field of 68 Media Network.